Welcome to the Clarion Ratio Daily World Brief, available at clarionratio.com. Today is Sunday, July 12th, 2026, and, well, we are looking at a highly kinetic military escalation in the Middle East right now.
Oh.
Over the weekend, the U.S. launched a third round of airstrikes, hitting roughly 140 Iranian military targets. And in direct response, Iran has targeted U.S. bases across the Gulf, and they actually claim to have completely closed the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, we are seeing direct blows across multiple sovereign borders here. And the immediate trigger for this weekend's exchange was, well, it was an Iranian strike on a commercial vessel navigating a vital international corridor.
That was the GFS Galaxy, right? The Cyprus-flagged ship.
Exactly, yes. An Iranian warning shot struck the ship. It caused a massive fire, and the entire crew had to abandon ship. 10 Indian nationals were rescued, but as of today, one is still missing. Which, brings us to this high-stakes contradiction playing out in real time. Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced that the Strait of Hormuz is closed to hostile traffic, but U.S. Central Command immediately countered that, insisting commercial traffic is flowing.
But if you were listening to this, this is not just abstract military posturing. Shutting down that strait means an immediate structural spike in global energy costs.
Right, because a huge percentage of the world's daily oil physically has to pass through that very narrow channel. There are just very few alternative pipelines.
And when a choke point like that is threatened, you see that risk premium hit your heating bill or the cost of groceries almost immediately. Plus, democratic governments suddenly have to make this agonizing choice between funding military deployments to keep those sea lanes open or funding domestic social programs. It's a direct hit to household and civic budgets.
Absolutely, and the regional fallout is expanding rapidly, too. Iran targeted U.S. bases in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman using ballistic missiles and drones. Oman even summoned the Iranian ambassador over this, which is, frankly, a highly unusual rupture in protocol. Oman is traditionally the quiet, neutral mediator in Middle Eastern conflicts.
We are also seeing the United Arab Emirates activating their defense systems to intercept incoming missiles, which shows how fast this is spreading. But in a related development, there is another critical waterway being paralyzed right now, but this one is in Eastern Europe, the Sea of Azov.
Yeah, over the course of less than a week, Ukrainian drone forces have targeted 90 Russian vessels. They have hit tankers, military ferries, and they actually struck the major Syzran oil refinery.
90 vessels in a week? That is just an incredible volume.
It is, and the disruption to Russian logistics is immense. Moscow has been forced to suspend shipping through the Don Azov Canal entirely, which, as former Ukrainian Defense Minister Andriy Zagorodnyk pointed out, basically turns the Caspian Sea into an isolated internal lake. It severely cuts off Russian agricultural and fertilizer exports.
And Russia's shadow fleet, the uninsured vessels they use to transport sanctioned oil, they cannot safely navigate the Kerch Strait anymore. But looking at the mechanics here, it is staggering how multi-billion-dollar traditional naval power is being completely rewritten by cheap, asymmetrical drone technology.
It is, it's a terrifying economic asymmetry. A United States Patriot missile interceptor costs roughly $4 million per shot. The incoming drone they are trying to shoot down might cost $20,000 or, well, sometimes much less. The attacker does not even need to sink your billion-dollar destroyer. They just need to exhaust your expensive ammunition.
Because once the interceptors run out, that massive ship is entirely defenseless against a swarm of cheap toys.
Exactly. And this introduces a really dangerous lack of human friction into the conflict. When warfare becomes this cheap and increasingly automated, the barrier to launching a strike drops dramatically. The financial cost and the human risk to your own forces are almost zero.
But the human cost on the receiving end remains devastating. We are seeing civilian casualties in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region from Russian retaliatory strikes just this weekend.
Right. Families in Kryvyi were killed. When the mechanics of war become frictionless for the military operators sitting behind a screen, the human toll on the surrounding civilian populations just quietly and inevitably expands.
That specific vulnerability, the reality that expensive traditional defenses can be bypassed so easily by cheap tech, it connects directly to a deep structural panic we're seeing across Europe right now. They are realizing they cannot secure their own borders or their digital infrastructure without relying heavily on the United States.
The defense lag in Europe is severe. European militaries are acutely dependent on American hardware. They rely on U.S. Patriot air defense batteries for intercepting aerial threats and Tomahawk cruise missiles for deep precision strikes. When they need to protect their airspace from the exact drone swarms we just discussed, they are fundamentally reliant on Washington's defense industry.
They were trying to build indigenous systems to close this gap, though. They initiated a framework called Decoder, which involves all 26 EU member states alongside Norway and Ukraine.
Yes, and it is not just about building physical drones. It is about creating an independent software architecture so European militaries can share targeting data without routing it through American servers. They are also developing IRIS-2, which is a 10 billion euro satellite network for secure battlefield communications, entirely independent of private U.S. services like Starlink.
But we also have this massive new vulnerability vector, which is artificial intelligence. Anthropic, a major U.S. AI developer, just announced they are blocking foreign users from their top-tier AI software, citing strict U.S. national security orders.
And that abrupt decision sent a wave of panic through European tech and defense sectors. These specific AI models are highly capable of scanning code and identifying software vulnerabilities.
So if a nation does not control the AI models required to find vulnerabilities in its own civic or corporate software, they just do not control their economic autonomy or national security.
Precisely. The German Interior Minister pointed this out plainly. If Europe fails to shape technological innovation, they will inevitably end up among its victims.
There is a localized effort to counter this, to be fair. The French company Mistral AI recently secured investments valuing it at roughly 12 billion euros, and a new Franco-German AI research center is opening late this year. But, let me challenge this European timeline. They are aiming for strategic autonomy in the 2030s. If the world is this volatile today, how does Europe protect its civic infrastructure in the intervening 4 years?
That is the glaring strategic gap. They remain highly exposed, and their leadership knows it. The only short-term solution is to purchase more American equipment to bridge the gap. The German government actually just brokered a memorandum of understanding with Washington to purchase a new stockpile of Tomahawk cruise missiles. To protect their citizens in the immediate term, they have to deepen the very reliance they're desperately trying to escape.
We are going to pivot from international security to a landmark shift in U.S. tech governance in just a second. But a quick reminder, for more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinarratio.com. So, looking at the United States, a jury just awarded $6 million to a 20-year-old woman in a monumental lawsuit against Meta and Google.
This case fundamentally alters the legal framework surrounding social media. The jury concluded that platforms like Instagram and YouTube are addictive by design, and that this intentional architectural design directly caused the plaintiff severe clinical depression and body dysmorphia.
The evidence was harrowing. The plaintiff, Kaylee, began using YouTube at age 6 and Instagram at age 9, and the trial detailed how she spent up to 16 hours a day on Instagram. But the mechanics of how her legal team secured this victory are fascinating. The lead lawyer, Mark Lanier, weaponized artificial intelligence against the tech giants.
He utilized the exact technology that Silicon Valley champions to dismantle their corporate defense strategy.
Lanier used a bespoke AI model to construct what he called shadow juries. He fed the AI detailed demographic, economic, and psychological profiles of the actual anonymous jurors sitting in the courtroom.
He essentially created digital avatars of the jury pool. Every night, he tested his arguments on these avatars to see what resonated. If the AI avatar of a 45-year-old nurse found an argument unconvincing, Lanier rewrote his strategy.
It was a hyper-personalized, data-driven dress rehearsal. And he used that preparation to present internal documents proving these companies employed what he termed casino science and deliberate dark patterns in their code. The core mechanism they exposed was intermittent variable rewards.
Let us break down how that works psychologically. When you pull the lever on a physical slot machine, it does not give you a payout every time. If it never paid out, you would simply quit. The algorithm is engineered to give you a reward just often enough to keep your brain guessing.
Because the anticipation of the unknown outcome releases dopamine, not the reward itself. And Lanier proved that tech companies adopted this exact mechanism for features like the pull to refresh feed. You never know if you will see a boring advertisement or a highly engaging post. That engineered unpredictability creates the addiction loop in a child's developing brain.
He even presented a 2012 Google memo stating YouTube's primary goal was explicit viewer addiction. Another document referred to the platforms as slot machines, where the house always wins.
For over a decade, tech platforms have relied on this legal shield, arguing they are merely neutral hosts of third-party content, like a telephone company not being liable for what people say on a call. This verdict entirely pierces that shield. It holds the companies legally and financially liable for the design of the product itself.
The algorithms, the infinite scroll, the notification structures. The defense tried to argue that Kaylee's issues stemmed from pre-existing learning disabilities, but the jury categorically rejected that. With over 2,000 similar lawsuits currently pending, we are really witnessing a big tobacco moment for Silicon Valley.
If companies are financially liable for the psychological harm caused by their algorithms, the financial incentive to addict children suddenly transforms into a massive corporate liability. But speaking of massive institutional structures, we are also seeing how much weight rests on individual human nodes within democratic governance. Over the weekend, influential Republican Senator Lindsey Graham died of cardiac arrest at the age of 71.
This occurred shortly after he returned from a diplomatic trip to Kyiv. Senator Graham was a highly interventionist voice in U.S. foreign policy for over 2 decades. He strongly supported military action in Iraq, opposed the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and was a primary architect for arming Ukraine and backing Israel.
His sudden absence creates immediate asymmetrical chaos in Washington. The Senate currently sits at a 53-47 Republican majority. And Graham was not just a single vote, he was the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee and a senior voice on appropriations.
Even though his temporary vacancy will be filled by an appointment from South Carolina's governor, the new appointee will not inherit Graham's decades of institutional leverage or committee power. It paralyzes committee votes and throws the Republican Party's foreign policy apparatus into disarray just 4 months before a highly volatile national election.
It demonstrates the profound vulnerability of relying on individual political actors to maintain geopolitical stability. But the vulnerability of the individual civil servant is playing out much more violently in India right now, highlighting how fragile the rule of law becomes when a massive democratic system fails to protect its own judges.
The situation unfolding in the state of Madhya Pradesh speaks volumes about the health of the Indian judiciary and the mechanics of majoritarian intimidation.
Judge Tabassum Khan recently sentenced 14 men to life in prison. In 2022, these men were part of a mob that brutally assaulted and killed a 50-year-old man named Nazir Ahmad, who was transporting cattle at night. The attackers claimed to be cow protectors, since cows are sacred in Hinduism and their slaughter is strictly illegal in many states.
But Judge Khan examined the evidence, applied the penal code, and ruled it a clear, undeniable case of premeditated mob lynching. And the backlash has entirely bypassed the formal appellate process and escalated directly to violent, systemic intimidation.
Because Judge Khan is Muslim, right-wing influencers are weaponizing her religious identity to attack her legal ruling. She is now facing a highly coordinated online campaign of death and rape threats. Mobs are burning effigies of her in the streets, demanding the immediate release of the convicted men. A news anchor on a prominent right-wing channel even urged viewers to speak up for the men who put everything on the line to save cows.
This is a critical indicator of democratic health. When a judge's personal religious identity is used to delegitimize her legal authority, the fundamental protections of a society begin to collapse. As former Supreme Court Justice Markandeya Katju noted, if a judge cannot dispense justice based on established law without facing majoritarian mob intimidation, the rule of law practically ceases to exist.
How does a democracy maintain its institutions when the state forces its civil servants to endure that level of terror simply for applying the law?
It requires the state to assert its monopoly on security and actively protect its judiciary. The High Court has actually ordered the state to provide her with continuous armed police protection. But the sheer fact that armed guards are required for a civil servant simply delivering a verdict shows a dangerous fracture in civic stability. The law is only as strong as the state's physical willingness to protect those who enforce it.
When we look at the overarching pattern across all the sources we examine today, a very clear and disturbing structural theme emerges. We are watching asymmetric forces systematically dismantle massive established structures.
It is the defining dynamic of the current era. Cheap, asymmetrical drones are paralyzing global shipping lanes in the Sea of Azov and the Middle East. A single lawyer armed with an AI shadow jury is successfully threatening the trillion-dollar business model of Silicon Valley. Online mobs are threatening the foundational rule of law in the world's largest democracy.
And the sudden death of one senator alters the foreign policy math of a superpower. The barrier to disruption has completely collapsed. It used to require a massive naval fleet to close a vital sea lane or an army of corporate lawyers to defeat Google in court.
The friction required to break systems across military, legal, and civic domains is vanishing. The question we must ask ourselves as we look at this landscape is profound. What happens to global stability when anyone, anywhere, with access to cheap technology or a coordinated online network can systematically dismantle the institutions that govern us?
That is a reality that will linger with you long after the news cycle moves on. Thank you for joining us for this Claire Horatio Daily World Brief. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clairehoratio.com. Take care.